Nick Nolte, sexiest man alive.
Well, you can find anything on the internet.
Yeah, this is from 1992. And I will show you.
Find an article that tells you that blueberries cause infertility. So you can find.
One second, no, this is
internet.
people. This is legit. Let me show you the photo that they use.
But not People Magazine. It's not People Magazine.
It's just people.
It's just people. People say this.
So the movie that I found the scariest isn't actually a conventional horror movie. It's a film from the 70s called Hellstorm Chronicles. It's a movie about, so they essentially, the filmmakers took macro footage of insects and stitched it together with a false narrative about a scientist who claims that in 200 years there'll be possibly two species that'll inherit the earth, either insects or man, and it's for sure not going to be man. So what this man, like, the narrative is this man has been like laughed out of science circles, and he's just warning the world that the insects are coming, and then he's interspersing tiny macro footage of insects literally ripping each other apart. There's sequences of carpenter ants going to war, and they don't stop fighting until like all of their body parts have been ripped apart. There's another ant colony invades a termite colony, and the termites push back the ants, send out their warriors to die, and then like close the termite, close the mound that was ruined, so that those termites die and hold off the ants, and then the colony is safe. It's just the most terrifying thing ever, because there's a narrative to it, but it also is just like, it's just pure, unadulterated, like, fury that is insects. It's gross, disgusting, it's terrifying. There's a sequence in which African ants, I just think I hate ants, African ants tear apart an iguana-sized lizard in all of 30 seconds. Like, I'm sure there was a bit of like footage, but it's absolutely terrifying. Insects are terrifying. That movie is terrifying. Check it out if you can find it. It's the Hellstorm Chronicles.
I've got sort of two answers. The first one is the first time I remember ever being like affected by a movie. I watched Jaws when I was probably like 5, and I couldn't get out of bed at night because I thought my floor was the ocean and that I was going to be eaten. And I was like terrified. And that was the first time I think a movie actually like scared me. And then like for actual, like the last time I remember seeing a movie and actually being creeped out by it was probably, I saw The Exorcist at TIFF. And I just remember like the opening scenes when you have the dogs fighting, and then Max von Sydow standing over that cliff, like looking at the statue of Pazuzu, and it's just zooming in on the statue of Pazuzu, and you get the intercuts with the dogs fighting, and there's that like jarring, just violin shrieking score. That I remember just being like, this is a really, because I don't think I'd seen it before. This was a few years ago. I think it was the first time I'd ever seen it was in theaters, and I just remember like expecting it to be completely different. Like you expect it to be a haunted house movie, kind of just from the poster. If you don't really know much about it, you kind of expect going into it that it's going to be like, oh, it's going to start with, it's like Insidious. Like it's going to start with a couple moving into a house, or a family moving into a house or something. And then it's going to, carry on from there. But no, you start in Iran, I think it is, where the movie starts. And it's just like a really bizarre, kind of the definition of like atmospheric horror, even when Father Maron's the old one, when the guy goes downstairs into the subway and there's like the homeless person just staring at him on the ground, and the subway cart goes by and it's like flashing at him, and you almost think that you see like Pazuzu's face, because Pazuzu's face just appears throughout the movie, but it's not. It's still just a homeless. It's just a very, I don't know, there's something with that movie that kind of is weird. Surprisingly, it's always, it's The Exorcist.
Well, the movie that actually gave me nightmares for like 5 years was Chucky, because I watched Chucky 10 years old, and it scared the living everything out of me. But when you watch it now, it's actually quite bad, and like not very effective. But horror just really works on me. I am afraid of everything in all movies, and I don't like bad things happening to kids. So actually mine was going to be The Exorcist is probably the scariest like actual horror movie that I watched. Like the Exorcist, and I've seen The Exorcist of Emily Rose. Just all of the movies about children being possessed. You know, I don't like bad things happening to kids, and horror movies love using bad things happening to kids. And that kind of was why Chucky scared me as well, because I had a lot of stuffed animals, and I really believed that things had souls, including inanimate objects, a la Toy Story. And then Chucky just took Toy Story and made it real dark. And like, maybe they're not just alive, maybe they have the soul of a serial killer who like voodooed his way into a doll. And maybe now I live with those dolls, and maybe they're gonna wake up one day and try to get me to kill my mom and set themselves on fire and run around my house. Whew. I don't like horror movies. I don't like Chucky. So, as much as I'm saying I could totally watch it now, I don't actually think I could. Because I also don't like voodoo. Anything about voodoo dolls, it's just like bad juju in the air, and I just don't. Energy is real, and that's my answer.
All right, Michael, Mr. Not Scared of Anything.
Oh, I am scared of a lot of things. I just had to dig deep, so thanks for giving me some time. So this is kind of tough because my big fear is being alone with things. And weird, but what I mean is a malignant presence that manifests itself in such a way that it's seemingly birthed just to screw with one person. I have always rejected the notion that ambiguity is terrifying as to whether something is real or not. I think what is scary is that, and Cullen and I were talking about this with the movie we're currently writing, Daylight Again, about how when you are alone with something where no one thing the thing is doing is bad enough to really warrant that much concern, but it's so targeted you become concerned. And then when you come to realize that that is very much a malignant physical presence and not just your imagination, that's when it actually becomes something terrifying. So when I was a kid, this isn't a movie, but there was an episode of the Twilight Zone, the original run, called The Dummy, starring Cliff Robertson, where the premise was, and this is kind of getting back to Mandy's fear about being alone with an inanimate object that only you can talk to. And the entire conceit of that episode, and it's just that classic cliche of the ventriloquist is being controlled by a dummy. And yet to me, what was so upsetting to me was the fact that this man had done nothing wrong. All he had ever yearned for was someone to understand him and the thing that he was going through. And he ends the episode being punished by being turned into a dummy, and the dummy becomes a man. It's very weird. It's not a properly cinematic answer, but those are the things that always stuck with me. Okay, so before we started recording our individual answers, we started reminiscing over a trend that has kind of fallen by the wayside. Finding DVDs in a box of cereal. Like there was a trend where you could get like PC games, like the Game of Life for computer in a box of cereal, but you could also get movies like this weird direct-to-video version of Alice in Wonderland starring Whoopi Goldberg as the Cheshire Cat. And I wanted to talk to you guys about this because, Mandy, you said that was deeply upsetting to you, and it was to me. And I want to talk about how I don't think there's anything that there aren't many movies that I'm still scared of or am consciously afraid of, but there are plenty of things that I've revisited from my childhood, like The Dummy, that I wasn't necessarily scared of at the time, but 10 years down the road have come back to haunt me. So I wanted to ask you guys, the group, a question: what nostalgic media still scares you in a way where you're like, it's not the worst, but you're like, why did I ever find that palatable? If that makes sense.
King Kong, the video game,
sure,
used to terrify me because you spend half that movie fighting off giant bugs and raptors. But I mean, I think that's kind of intentional. It's not really surprising if that's scary for a child, nor was it scary for me as an adult. But I remember that that game, I used to play the game for hours at a time. Really terrified me.
Noticing bugs as a theme for this entire.
Bugs are gross.
So
I used to.
Sorry, Amanda, go ahead.
I used to be terrified the only movie that we could watch as like a family horror movie was The Haunted Mansion with like Eddie Murphy, which didn't actually scare me until
theaters, yeah.
And we used to have it on DVD. We used to watch it all the time. There's one sequence where they go into like they have to get like a key and they have to go into like a tomb thing, and then all the things come alive and start chasing them out of the tomb, and then his son has to open the door and it's covered by spiders, which also used to be the scariest part to me, literally because of the bugs. That's just cruel, Colin. But the Haunted Mansion used to literally scare me because one night when we watched it, after we had watched it, my dad snuck into my room and hid in my closet and waited until my mom had put us in bed, and then he just walked out of the closet and said Romsley, which is the name of the butler who's like the evil guy in the movie. And it scared me so much to the point that like that movie still freaks me out just remembering that actual moment from my life.
Mm-hmm. No, it's the same. Psycho was like that for me. My dad always did Psycho to me in the shower. So.
Well, I think it's touching on something. Is that it's I was thinking about it. It's like I think of the four of us, I study horror the most, I think, and it's funny that my answer is not an actual conventional horror film, but it touches on the fact that like the uncanny is inherently what's frightening. And like that can take any form. And Michael, you asking as a child, like what frightened you, and maybe it was unconventional or something, but like that's when you're a child, you don't have context for so much. You fear so much because you don't know the 5 steps that come after it. You don't know this or that sort of thing. So something is very innately isolated in your mind when you encounter something that's odd. Again, we all have experiences with dolls, or we all have experiences with like creatures, like stuffed animals that are weird looking, sort of thing. And to not have any more context to it, especially as a child, that's what's frightening. That's what's uncanny about it. Like my fear of insects is you can't apply any form of empathy to insects. They act, and that's all they do. So yeah, it's the uncanny that's frightening. So fear can be anything.